Welcome to PIL Webinar 74, Around the Water Cooler. Is my program manager from outer space? Hey, Sandra, how are you today?
I'm all right, Scott. How's it going?
Good. I'm going to start off with a joke. Have you heard the one about the claustrophobic astronaut?
No, I haven't. What about him?
Well, he didn't have enough space.
Scott, another one of your jokes.
Actually, Sandra, this one is a homonym.
What is a homonym? Is it defined in the FAR?
No, but you're not far off. A homonym is a word that is spelled the same, but has two different meanings, sort of like a pun.
Oh, so you mean like the word acquisition?
What do you mean? An acquisition's an acquisition. I'm just awarding a contract, right?
Well, actually, when a program team uses the word acquisition, it may mean something a little different from when a contracting team uses it.
Really?
Yeah, didn't you read the script?
Oh.
Okay, you two. We have a webinar to produce, and I don't mean vegetables. Let's move on to slide 2. Before we explore space, let's stay on Earth for a little bit and do some housekeeping. Please sign in with your full name, component, and DHS email address using the chat pod to prove you attended this webinar and get your credit. If you didn't type your name, component, and email address in the chat pod when you entered the seminar room, please go ahead and type that in right now. For example, I would type in Chase Nechtel, MGMT, chase.nechtel@hq.dhs.gov. So please go ahead and do that now. Now, let's give you a quick orientation of the webinar layout. In the bottom right corner, we have the chat box. Not only is this where you type your full name, component, and DHS email address for credit like I just talked about, but also if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to type them in here. We have dedicated PIL staff monitoring the questions. But we don't want to make this a one-way communication, only where the audience is asking the PIL questions. We encourage you to all address each other's conversations and have dialogue in that way. Feel free to respond to your colleagues when there's something you want to address. Links. We have included links for both the PIL and links about today's topic, so please take a look at those. Also, for files, you can click in the upper right-hand dropdown and simply download all. From there, you'll be able to see the slides from today's case study, and they're available right immediately there. You may also select closed captioning to show a visible record of the audio for this webinar. Poll questions. Throughout the webinar today, you're going to see some poll questions. So please keep an eye out for those, and please be sure to respond, though some of them will be really fun. There's also a full screen option. If you want to enlarge the screen and then hover, in order to do that, hover your mouse in the top right corner, and you'll see 4 little arrows. Click on those 4 little arrows and enlarge your screen. And if you don't want it large anymore, click it again, and it will minimize your screen. Previously on the PIL, we talked about the search for innovative procurement authorities. You can find that webinar, as well as all of the previous 73 webinars before this, on the PIL's DHS Connect webpage, also available on the links I just talked about. Now, let's move on to our polls. Let's take a look at our poll results. How many PIL webinars have you attended? Let's see. Oh, a lot of people, this might be your first. Oh, 38%, 2 to 4. That's great to see. 5 to 7. Oh, that's almost 20%. That's a lot of people for 5 to 7. And over 10, 17%. 40 of you have attended over 10 webinars. That's really impressive. Let's take a look at our primary role. Let's see who's in the room with us. It looks like we have a lot of contracting officers, contract specialists, around 30%, a lot of PMs in the room, and 54% program, mostly PMs, COs or technical evaluators, and then some others. So great to see, and we're excited to have everybody here with us today. Okay, Scott, can you introduce our presenters today?
I would be happy to. In person with us today is John Gatewood from TSA. John, good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
And to throw another homonym into the mix, on the line with us is John Mosley from FEMA. John, good morning.
Greetings, Earthling.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce our tome from the top, the Deputy Component Acquisition Executive from FEMA, Mr. Ryan Murray. Ryan, please take it away.
Good morning. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you for having me. So I am, as you said, a program manager.
You're good, Ryan.
Okay. So I'm a program manager, head of the FEMA Program Management Community of Practice, and also a strategic advisor to the Component Acquisition Executive here at FEMA. So I'm very excited to kick off today's PILs around the webinar, around the water cooler webinar series for FY24. Whether it's an actual water cooler in the office or now the proverbial water cooler from our remote work locations, the water cooler is where we can find connection with our colleagues. It's where the informal conversations take place amongst coworkers, where the unplanned creative solutions are discussed, and it's sometimes where colleagues can take a quick break to relieve stress. For myself, I try to use the time, after an official meeting ends, before the next one begins, to, serve as this proverbial water cooler. So my advice to any COs, in the context of today's webinar that are interested in this other acquisition will be to chat up the program managers, find out what the state of the program is, where it's at in its life cycle, and it will probably provide some context into, the purpose for each of the individual acquisitions. So as they stated, this word acquisition at DHS has become quite of a homonym. It has a different meaning to program managers and contracting officers, and this can and has led to confusion between these two, particularly when you're working on an IPT to award a contract. So as the webinar title suggests, contracting officers may think their program managers are from outer space. I assure you they are from Earth. But in addition to these contract actions, they are responsible for guiding their entire acquisition program through the DHS Acquisition Lifecycle Framework, which includes a great many gate reviews and exhaustive documentation for each, which is stipulated in the DHS Management Directive 102. So today, a program manager from TSA will introduce the 4 phases of the acquisition program process to reveal what the program manager and other members of the IPT are doing long before a PR package is created for a contract. And after that, another program manager from FEMA's Pivot acquisition program will show the role contracting played in the mission delivery of the Pivot program at FEMA. So, the business advice provided by contracting officers prior to the creation of the PR package, sometimes 2 years in advance of the contract, is invaluable to program managers and to the mission success of the resulting contracts. It's these early engagements that can significantly enhance the procurement experience for all involved, which enables highly quality contracts that maximize mission capability. So today's presenters from TSA and FEMA will focus specifically on the acquisition program process and that important role that contracting officers play in the mission success of these programs. I hope you will find ways to incorporate these practices into your procurements. So the DHS CPO's vision and goal of fortifying trust in the DHS procurement brand, serving as flexible business advisors, and challenging the perceived boundaries of a contracting officer's traditional role is something we program managers are grateful for, not just for us, but for the delivery of high-quality mission capability to the frontline DHS mission. So I don't want to take up any more time. I know Scott and Sandra have a webinar to run, but I do want to thank John Gatewood from TSA and John Mosley from FEMA, a PM near and dear to my heart, for being here today and sharing their stories on this acquisition program process. I want to thank you all for your attendance and taking the time out of your day. And in FEMA, today's party day, so anybody that showed up from FEMA, you really are taking time out of your day to learn about this process and the opportunities to enhance collaboration and mission outcomes. So have a great day, and back to you, Scott and Sandra.
Thanks so much, Ryan, for those inspiring words.
And now to jump into today's content. Around the water cooler is my program manager from outer space. Now, around the water cooler is the standing theme for all of the PIL's webinars for FY24. This is the first time ever we've had a continuous theme for an entire fiscal year. Now, as Ryan described, the water cooler is where colleagues informally run new ideas and frustrations by each other. The webinars featured this year are topics that have been shared through both direct and indirect feedback from the acquisition workforce through coaching engagements, PIL boot camps, and particularly from the Competing Values Framework Assessment Survey that many of you took earlier this spring. We hope you enjoy this series, and we look forward to seeing you around the water cooler throughout the year. Now, the DHS Chief Procurement Officer, Paul Courtney, has 4 strategic priorities for the contracting workforce, and they are listed here as follows. They are to empower the workforce, energize partnerships through collaboration, inspire innovation to enhance mission capability, and to enrich the DHS procurement experience. Today's topics touch on all of these strategic priorities, but with special emphasis on the DHS procurement experience. Now, today's agenda is quite simple, but just like the planets, all of this needs to be told in the correct order. So we are going to start with exploring the acquisition program process. Next, we are going to take a landing craft lower into the atmosphere and take a closer look at an example on the planet FEMA.
We're taking a look at the acquisition program process today, and we've got a lot of webinars that touch on this topic. One of those examples is the FEMA Pivot program, which we discussed way back in webinar 39. You can also find webinars that sort of touch on this topic with market research best practices, with how to change culture, and how to get volunteers for evaluation teams. Now we're starting now where every webinar starts, and that's the launching pad, so to speak, the FAR swim lanes. Right, Sandra?
Well, actually, wait, Scott. Today, we're talking about the acquisition program process, which is more than just the FAR solar system. It's part of the FAR universe. So today's discussions really revolve around FAR Part 1 and how it defines the acquisition team. So the acquisition team is identified beginning with the customer and ending with the contractor of the product or service. I'm not sure if everyone really understood that or not. I know I didn't when I first became a contracting officer. By identifying the team members in this manner, teamwork, unity of purpose, and open communication among the members of the team is encouraged, and individual team members will participate in the acquisition process at the appropriate time. Now, this is straight from the FAR, and I think today we're going to learn more about what the appropriate time really means for all those players in the acquisition team.
That's right. Well, let's start our journey now. Our first guest is John Gatewood from the Transportation Security Administration's Office of the Chief Acquisition Executive. John, glad to have you here today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell people, how did you get into acquisitions?
Yes, thank you, Scott. So again, John Gatewood from TSA, and I work on the program management team at TSA, a group we call Acquisition Program Management, quite simply enough. And a few years back when I left the military, I joined my father's government consulting company to get my feet wet in business. And that first day, so he shows me my desk, and then he leaves and comes back with a book, and he says, many people fail in contracting because they do not know this information. I want you to start by reading parts 5 through 19, with a special focus on parts 12 through 15. So as many of you out there have guessed, on the very first day and throughout that week, that old Marine Master Sergeant forced me to read the FAR. But in the end, it turned out it was a good experience. It gave me great insight into the breadth and depth of knowledge that COs and CSs must have. So I really do appreciate the work that the 1102s do, and I'm happy to be here today.
We're glad to have you here today with us, John. Well, we are going to blow your mind today. We're going to dive really deep into that word acquisition. Now, spoiler, every acquisition program needs a contract, but not every contract is part of an acquisition program. This might be an emotional topic for some of you because I know that as a CEO, I used to think that I controlled that process end to end, but that is not necessarily true. This word has different meanings depending on who is using it. So John, you mentioned you're a PM with TSA. When a PM says acquisition program, what are they talking about? What does it mean to you as a PM?
Well, an acquisition program has several aspects involved that are part of a process. So that includes the conceptualization, initiation, design, development, test, contracting, of course, production, deployment, logistics, support, modification, and disposal of systems and supplies to satisfy our DHS needs. So to manage that process, we need some funding, of course. And an acquisition program draws money from congressional funding authorization of part of an agency's budget.
Now, the acquisition program we are talking about here is not a congressionally mandated program. We are talking about acquisition programs here, right, John?
That's correct.
And this definition from the left side of the screen that John just went over, that is different from the right side that a CO might give because we're not all speaking the same language yet. In fact, the FAR has a formal definition of acquisition, for our Part 2 definitions, has one for contracting officers that basically says what it says on the right there. It's a contract or a procurement. But John, are all contract acquisitions part of an acquisition program?
No.
And just like the solar system is part of something larger, part of the galaxy, we are all part of something bigger too. On the left-hand side, you can see the organizational structure of the procurement team. On the right-hand side, you can see the same for the acquisition team. You can see at the top on the left that the DHS secretary, by law, must appoint the senior procurement executive. And at DHS, that SPE is Paul Courtney, the chief procurement officer. But that might be different at other organizations. Here at DHS, the SPE and the CPO are the same. So the CPO gets his authority from the S1, from the secretary. Paul then delegates part of his authority down to the heads of contracting activities, whom we all know and love, and who oversee contracting officers and contract specialists. Now, on the right-hand side, instead of the secretary designating him, or her in this case, the USM, the Undersecretary for Management, designates the component acquisition executive with the advice of PARM. Now, the CAE is not normally the HCA, but it could happen, so take a look at your organizational structure. Let's start with the green boxes now, John. We see on the left HCA, we know that they are the head of the procurement shop. On the right-hand side, we've got a component acquisition executive. Who is this and what do they do?
Oh, yeah. So the CAE stands for, again, you said component acquisition executive, and the CAE has several responsibilities. But you know, to keep it simple here, the major aspect is to ensure compliance of the DHS acquisition program guidance and with the related processes. So the CAE is going to work closely with the senior functional leaders and the program managers within the component to determine the status of any existing or any future acquisition.
All right. Now, in some agencies, this org chart is all mixed up. Just like the alien there beaming up the cow, you've got the head of contracting activities that might fall under the CAE sometimes. The CAE and the HCA could be peers. That chain looks a lot different. So check out your org chart. Now, I do see this thing PARM here. I know it's not just a type of cheese. What does PARM do?
Well, PARM is the Performance, Accountability, and Risk Management, and that's also under the DHS Undersecretary for Management, led by Deborah Kotz. So PARM provides acquisition program oversight and supports the CAEs and the programs with and provides support for various management tools. So the program management guidance will usually come directly from PARM, but it can also come from other offices and be coordinated with PARM. Like one example for that might be like IT cybersecurity from programs, which would mainly come from the CIO.
All right. Sandra, I think we've got a poll up.
We do have a poll, so pardon me while I cover part of the slide. I refuse to get glasses. We asked, do you know the names of your HCA and CAE? I will say a majority of the folks in attendance today don't know, but they are going to find out. 20% of you say, yeah, you know who your HCA and your CAE are. And then I would say almost as a tie, 25% of you also, yeah, you know exactly who your HCA is. So I'm betting we have a lot of contracting officers in the room with us today.
Well, let's keep going here. I am still new to this whole acquisition program process, but I have done a lot of traveling. And I've been through many airports. And as we sit here at TSA, as they say, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport.
Oh, yeah.
But John, is this whole security line, is that one acquisition program process?
Oh, no. So what we have here, we have multiple. So as an example, so up front there, you have the part where passenger walks up, they get their IDs checked. And we'll talk more about that later, I believe. You also have the gentleman going through what's called the walk-through metal detector. Hopefully our airports have more newer equipment, not all of them, but in the end, it does the same thing. And next to that, we have the carry-on baggage scanner, the X-ray, and we also have the K9 program at the end. So those are 4 different programs here at TSA, although they may be part of one comprehensive process.
I understand there are 2 big things that can be used to describe an acquisition program process. What are those 2 things to describe them?
It's 2 organizational concepts. So one is that programs are categorized by levels. And at DHS, these levels are 1, level 2, and level 3. with 1 being the largest and 3 being the smallest. So programs also have management phases to ensure proper planning, ensure that actions are done during the proper time.
All right, well, let's start with those phases. John, what is the first phase of the acquisition program process?
Well, we have the need phase where we define the problem. There's something we want solved, maybe there's a capability we need, and so we examine that within the need phase. We also have the analyze select phase where we identify alternatives and resources. We may have a couple different ways to resolve this. And so we have to really think about what's the best way to do it, the best use of our resources. Then there's the obtain phase, where we develop capabilities and we evaluate them and make sure they work as they're supposed to before we feel it. And then there's the produce, deliver, sustain, and dispose phase. And just like it says, we produce, especially in the case of hardware equipment like a TSA, and we have to maintain them. So we have to provide some operational support.
So in our space theme here, in phase 1, that need phase, we're defining the problem. President Kennedy says we choose to go to the moon. And then about halfway there, Neil and Buzz say, we need more room in this capsule. And so we start in that, moving into phase 2. We're going through the analysis of alternatives, and we're looking at, do we want the Star Trek Enterprise, or do we want just something that we can build in this century? And we choose the space shuttle. Phase 3, we've got the obtain phase. We're developing, evaluating the capabilities there. We're building the spaceship. Phase 4, we've got to produce. We're delivering, sustaining, disposing the program. The shuttle's going up, the shuttle's coming back. John, how long do each of those stages normally take? And maybe this isn't the best example, but here at TSA and DHS, how long do they normally take?
That's a good question because, it's like asking several lawyers the same question. So the answer is going to depend. And the factors involved in that are the complexity of the effort, your available staff, your available funding for sure, and a host of other risk factors. So that said, in my sense, from talking from other program managers, is that 3 to 8 years is common. But the higher number, and it could be more than that higher number, applying to really large or really expensive endeavors, where there's a lot of technical complexity.
3 to 8 years. Wow. Let's look at this in a different way now. Let's look at the 4 phases and more of a timeline, thinking about those 3 to 8 years John just mentioned. John, in this example here, when does the procurement actually take place?
Well, the main procurement often takes place in the obtain phase. So that 3rd phase there, because that's when, you want to get the services needed. And we feds, we often don't develop and build things ourselves. We contract that out. So normally that phase right there. And later on there, we have the produce, deploy, and support phase. We have to sustain that.
All right. So you've got the big procurement in that obtain phase. But when do you like the CO to get involved?
Well, looking at all those phases, I think all of them are possible, and that also means as early on, if they can do that, time permitting.
And what advice are you hoping to get from the CO during those early phases, the need, the analyze?
At a minimum, we're looking at, or they should be on the lookout for areas or developments that may create a challenge for the contract. But their insight could be helpful in several places because if they're aware of the program environment, they can be aware of the challenges driving toward a desired outcome. Again, this is where the breadth and depth of contracting allows them to bring good problem-solving abilities to the table. And solving some of those problems, could in the end reduce their own workload and make it a lot easier on everybody.
Well, I like that. Reducing workload for a contracting officer, everyone gotta like that.
I'll take it.
There you go. All right. We've got the crew of the Star Trek Enterprise here, and it looks like to me they're the Interstellar Planetary Away Team, IPT, but I don't think that's what it stands for. John, what does IPT stand for you?
Well, sure. IPT is used a lot of different ways. It could be the Integrated Product Team, the Integrated Process Team, the Integrated Project Team, the Integrated Planning Team. Seen it several ways, but regardless of the specific term used for that P, the concept is largely the same. So what you have a group of functional experts, subject matter experts, and stakeholders, and they work together to solve planning issues and to obtain a successful outcome.
Okay. And who's normally part of that IPT, and are they always the same?
No, they're not always the same. But efforts of similar size and complexity could have a very similar makeup. So members would include a finance or a budget or funding, some policy experts, or your end user or your requirements representative, the CORs, IT, and of course you have your program manager, the CO.
Yep. And that IT one, that's the one that might change, because if you're not buying something that's IT, well, maybe IT is not in the room and then maybe they're switched in with some other subject matter expert, right?
Yeah, it could be. It could be hard to buy anything that's not IT these days. Almost everything's plugged in unless you're buying a box of rocks.
Well, this is true. All right. Now we can see here that at this point, the CO, that's Commander Data down there in the bottom, the Android, he's a business advisor here. What functions do they serve on the IPT before the PR package is submitted, John?
Well, it's like we have here. They can provide contracting guidance and advice, help with market research. They can also advise with the end in mind, and I really like that because that may not be specific to contracting alone. That could be a lot of different problem solving, as I referred to earlier. So the CEO is going to learn about the requirement and background and ensure the correct path for the PR package and documents. Again, try to get on the straight and narrow and make things more efficient, easier.
All right. Sandra, I think we've got another poll up.
Yes, we do. We asked our audience here, have you been part of an IPT? And I'm pleased to announce that a majority of you, 68%, that's over 100 of you, say yes, you many times, and you find it meaningful. I would say the lowest answer is yes, but I've never understood my role. Well, we're really glad to have them here in the webinar today. We're hoping everyone can have an enhanced understanding of their role. And some of them say, we have 18% who say no, but I'm excited to join one soon. Wonderful. Well, we're happy to hear from you and happy to have you here today.
Excellent. And I think we've got a question in the chat. It's a very important question. He says, Kirk or Picard? And that's not really that important because everyone should know it's Picard. Come on now.
No, it's clearly Kirk, right?
No, I think we're having a language issue here, Sandra.
Let's try to understand each other better, Scott.
There you go. All right, we're back to the timeline. And in this timeline now, we've got new dots here, diamonds, the acquisition decision event. What is that, John?
Well, the acquisition decision events are gates. They're checkpoints where leaders examine a program to see if it has done the proper planning to take it to the next phase, proper planning and proper actions.
Okay, so it's a gate review, and in between each of these, we get something, but when does the money show up?
Show me the money.
Right.
Well, upon making it past 80E2A, that decision event, the effort officially becomes a program. Under DHS guidelines, it can move forward with development and spend funds specifically set aside for that. So that includes contracting, of course. Technically and hopefully the program funds are already there before the decision event, but they cannot be spent until getting past that 2A decision event.
Okay, so that 2A is really important. That's when the money can be spent. So you might not get the money at that event. There might be a gate there. You might have it beforehand set aside, but you can't spend that money until 2A. If that's the case, who gets to decide then? Who's that decision authority that you can now go and start spending money?
Well, for larger acquisition programs, level 1s and 2s, it's going to be the USM, the Undersecretary for Management. That's very high up, of course. And for level 3, the CAEs have that authority, so at the component level.
Okay. Now, if we click once, I can see more procurement events. They're just popping up all over the place, but they're before the funding arrives. So I know that we're not being anti-deficient. What are these other procurements about, John?
Yeah, we don't want to be anti-deficient. I'm also a core, so I don't know what you're talking about. Almost made that mistake once. There may be a need to get some services earlier. For example, getting analytical and document support from analytical and document support from an FFRDC like MITRE, for example. During the needs and analyze phase. But funds for that are often scarce. Since they have, they're not coming specifically from the program usually, and they have to come out of hide, as we say, from the existing budget.
Okay, so these are ones that are going to support you as you move towards 2A. They're helping you define the problem. They're helping you do that analyze, select, and then you move into the obtain phase. These are ancillary contracts. They're not like the end product of the acquisition program.
Right.
Okay. All right. I also see that sometimes we have procurements in that final phase, in that purple phase. What kind of procurements do you typically have there?
That's the operations. Some people often call it our post-final operation. So that's when the effort is out there and it's working. And so contracts you need are often the maintenance contracts for IT or hardware.
So we're in the O&M phase here.
Right.
This might be a recompete. It might be a modification. All of those things might be happening here in the purple phase, that stage 4.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right.
I have a question before we move on.
Yeah.
This money, because as a contracting officer, when I see something that says, show me the money, I'm thinking I'm getting a PR. That has the funding on it. But here it says it's the Undersecretary for Management or the component acquisition executive who agrees to get the money. I just want to clarify, so John, that means that they approve that you can now go get money out of the budget to create your PR. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, you want the money to be there so there's no programmatic delays. So hopefully the money is there, but you cannot use it. The guidelines say you cannot use it until you have decision authority says, okay, you're cleared to move forward, you've done proper planning, we're ready to go to the next step.
That's useful to know. So it could be that you'd love to have a PR package done earlier. It's just, you got to get through that gate to actually free up the money to get it on a PR.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, very good. That's really helpful to know as a contracting officer. Thank you.
Sandra, I think we're ready for an exercise to see if people are following along.
Oh, you're right. So let's check our knowledge so far. It is just about lunchtime. So I'm thinking we should try to apply the acquisition program process to lunch. So if the acquisition program process was lunch, we know that phase 1 is identify the need. If everyone can let me know in the chat, which of these photos, is it photo A, B, C, or D? Which one identifies the need? I have the need. A majority of you are saying D. Yes, D identifies the need. I am hungry. That is the need. I've identified the need. I didn't need a contractor to help me with that. I'm good to go. All right, the next phase is the analyze select phase. So with the remaining photos, which one reflects the analyze select phase? Oh, everyone here wants to go to lunch. They're saying C. Yeah, the analyze, do I want pizza or do I want a sandwich? I'm analyzing what it is I want for lunch. All right, very good, everyone, very well done. All right, the third phase is the obtain phase. Which one of these photos represents the obtain phase? Wow, everyone really wants lunch, Scott. They're saying...
No, wait, they don't want lunch. They're saying B, like a bumblebee.
I know, but it's coming fast and heavy.
It's
this
a
tells me
hominid.
that they're very excited. Oh, hominid. You got me on that one.
There you go.
B, yes, B. This is when you actually go out and buy your lunch. And that's what these folks are doing. They decided a food truck today. That means the final phase, that produce, deploy, support, dispose phase is A. This is when you actually enjoy your food, and when you're done, please remember to recycle.
That's right.
Very well done, everyone.
That's great. I'm really glad that people are following along with this. All right. We're at the end of the obtain phase. We've got our sandwich now. We're moving into finding a table to eat that sandwich and sustain us. After it's deployed, John, we've got this program in use. Do you ever have to change anything in that acquisition program?
Oh, sure. You might have to do that. So here, we're depicting the TSA credential authentication technology. On Canada's equipment at airports, we use to read IDs. So the equipment is not a handheld scanner yet, not yet, but who knows what lies ahead. So the CAT can examine the ID for authenticity and also read information on it to determine whether it matches what was entered when the tickets were purchased. That's very important. So, but then came COVID, right? And so now there's a mission need to reduce contact with the equipment. There's also a call to improve the equipment communications, with the systems, and also they handle biometrics. So from a program standpoint, there are a lot of program documents that had to be amended to be able to incorporate those capabilities.
Okay. Can you share an example with us that might have been relevant?
Well, we talked about it, like I just said, with COVID, you want less contact and that. But from a contracting standpoint, that couldn't be done with the existing contract we had. So contracting wise, they needed a new contract to address the new mission needs.
Okay. So what do you have to do to amend an acquisition program? And does that include, like you said, awarding a new contract, modifying the old contract? What does all that entail?
So again, planning documents we have to look at. We might have to amend those. And you have to work with the CO and team to get it going in the right direction. Dynamic programs have real challenges because you never know what changes are going to come down the line. And with that, can I give a shout out, please?
Yeah.
So quick shout out to our award-winning CAT team, by the way. So they have dynamic product with dynamic technology and lots of outside interest outside of the agency. So they keep pretty busy and have said that they really benefit from the support and involvement of their own CEO, Megan Tessa.
Very nice. Congratulations to the CAT team. I do have a question about that. You said you have to do some paperwork. We talked about the 2A event, the acquisition deficient event 2A, and how the USM or the CAE approves that. Do you ever have to go back to them when you're amending or modifying the program?
Yes. Yeah, you may have to go back because you have changes in the capability and may need to be looked at. So, yes.
Okay, so they're always kind of human in the loop there. All right.
Can I ask, I have to say that you have to amend your program as a contracting officer, red flags would go off for me. I would think, we're not amending the contract,
Mm-hmm.
we're not modifying it, but you're not even talking about the contract. You're saying, I gotta amend my program. And in this case, you just need a new contract. You're not always out talking about the contract itself. It sounds like.
Right. And so depending on what's going on, you could amend the contract to get what you need, but in some cases, the changes are enough where you need a new contract. So CAT already had the CAT version 1 out there. So now they need a version 2 that addresses these new mission needs. That's a new contract in this case.
Got it. So modifying a program, an acquisition program, doesn't necessarily mean modifying a contract. It might mean you just need a new contract. Thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate that.
That was a great question, Sandra. If you've got questions out there in the universe, drop them in the chat. A long time ago, we talked about how there were 2 things that classified an acquisition program process: the stage and the level. We've been talking a lot about the stage, and we've been talking a lot about space today. So I've got a couple of different space-themed movies here to go over the levels. At the bottom there, that's level 3. That is Arrival. Great movie, but it didn't make a lot of money. Only about $200 million. Only, yeah. But that's definitely my favorite, and I challenge anyone to drop a better movie in the chat. At that next level, level 2, E.T. by Steven Spielberg. Classic movie, not my favorite, but it made almost $800 million, and that was in the 1980s. Now, at the top of that list, level 1, that's where you've got the epic worldwide blockbuster of a movie like Avengers, which includes a talking raccoon, so you must know it's about aliens, and that made $1.5 billion. John, are the acquisition program levels anything at all like this?
Well, first of all, I'm super disappointed in my favorite movie, Highlander, isn't on there. So, but in any case, so the analogy fits in any case, right? And so, the levels, capital assets and services, the categorization is a little different. And capital assets, by the way, are tangible. You see those software, hardware, and more tangible side. And of course, what services are. So for capital assets, level 3, if it's above 50 million but below 300 million. Level 2, between 300 million and 1 billion, and level 1 over 1 billion. And I should emphasize, we're typically talking about over a 10-year lifespan.
Okay.
Looking at 10 years.
All right.
Services is a little different. 50 million to 100 million, so level 3. Level 2, after 100 million to 1 billion, gets to the level 2, and then level 1 is over $1 billion.
Okay. And so what's the difference between a capital asset and a service?
Again, I'll mention the capital asset is for more tangible items, software, equipment, hardware, and services that I think we understand.
Services, sure. We all know services. Yeah, we're good to go.
I have a question in the chat.
Oh, we've got a question in the chat. Are these figures for the full contract term, or are they annual sums, John?
Yeah, so looking out for 10 years.
Okay, so 10 years. This is the 10-year value. So it's not 1 year, and it's not the full program. That's the 10-year one. Is there any ability, or are these indexed for inflation? Does this change over time, John?
Oh yeah, it can. At least annually, these are going to be updated. It's a very important part of the process.
Okay, so these are going to change a little bit.
So
Now,
how does that, so these thresholds, they do change with inflation, so that like they could change every year, the thresholds?
Well, the thresholds are usually fixed. Okay, they're fixed thresholds unless policy dictates otherwise, but historically they've been pretty fixed.
Who decides if the thresholds change?
I'm not exactly sure. No, I get the advice and the guidance from PARM, and
Okay.
That's what I follow.
We'll say it falls with farm. Sounds
There you
good.
go.
Okay.
all right, so if I've got a contract that's valued at 300 million, level 2, right there, square in the middle, does that automatically mean that it falls within the acquisition program just because it's $300 million?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Okay, so not every contract is part of an acquisition program process.
Ooh, that's deep.
Got it.
All right.
All right.
All right. Well, now that we are expanding our language skills, now that you've learned a little bit about the acquisition program language, 1102s have some questions that they can go back and ask their PM. They can ask, is this part of a formal acquisition program process? You can ask, what stage are you in? Have you passed your ADE 2A, right? And you can ask, well, what level of program is this? And this is all going to come in very handy when you're filling out your next acquisition plan. Well, John, thanks so much for explaining the acquisition program process to us. What are some of the things that you hope that this leads to in the future now that we can all understand it a little better?
Well, clearly contracting is an important part of our acquisition program management process. Again, we federal employees, we don't build our own systems or equipment very often, very rarely. So we have to contract that support. And the CO, CS involvement during our phases, leads to less confusion overall. So getting it better advice early, improving collaboration between all members of an IPT or program team, reducing delays, and leading to the CO getting better PR packages, and it can improve the intra-component relationships. This can also lead to better ideas. Maybe there's more awareness of more program and program risks that will compel a need to contract in a different but better way to get a better mission outcome.
Oh, excellent information, John. I am hopeful for the future, and I really do hope that they come in peace. Thanks for being with us today, John.
My pleasure, thanks.
Roger, Roger, breaker, breaker. We're interrupting our regularly scheduled broadcast to present to you a new initiative launched to the DHS acquisition workforce called the Procurement Innovation Neighborhood, or the PIN. The PIN was launched in response to feedback from all of you, the DHS acquisition workforce. The PIN is an informal, monthly, 1-hour community of interest gathering featuring informal how-to conversations around specific techniques and very recent policy and protest decisions related to innovating the procurement process and enhancing the DHS procurement experience. Yesterday's soft launch of the PIN featured a CO, Sheila Henley, who I believe is on with us today, from FLETC, who shared how she recently used an innovative procurement technique, followed by a quick review of a recent GAO decision related to select best suited then negotiate. To be added to the monthly calendar invite for the PIN, simply go to our PIL DHS Connect page and click on the PIN icon to send us an email at pil@hq.dhs.gov and request to be added to the invite. We meet the second Wednesday of every month on Microsoft Teams from 11:30 to 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So that means bring your lunch and also please bring a friend.
And now we're going to take a quick look at the acquisition program process in action with a story from FEMA. And with us once again is John, although this is a different John. John Mosley, are you on the line? And if so, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello there. Yes, my name is John Mosley. I'm with FEMA. I am the program manager for the Pivot system.
Thank you, John. And we do have a question in the chat. Can you drop the PIN URL in the chat? Yes, if one of our teammates can drop the PIL mailbox in the chat, simply send us an email, and then you too can receive an invite for the PIN. Now, John, thank you for being here today. For our audience, we are going to learn about an acquisition program called Pivot. Now, I played basketball before. John, can you tell us, is that what we are talking about, the pivot move in basketball?
No, it is not. And FYI, Pivot is not an acronym. So Pivot is basically pivoting away from the old legacy system that we had. But Pivot is an acquisition program, and it sits underneath the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a congressionally mandated program established in 1968, and it was designed to protect Americans from flood risk, which is the #1 natural disaster.
Oh, so NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, Congress created it, but that is different from the acquisition program process. Am I hearing that right?
That is correct. The system Pivot is what facilitates the National Flood Insurance Program's activities.
Okay. Now, John, it sounds like it's just another IT system. So can you tell us a little bit about, why does the National Flood Insurance Program need this Pivot IT, acquisition program? What does it do exactly?
Well, it manages the claims and the policies of the National Flood Insurance Program. So all of those homeowners and business owners out there that have flood insurance policies, the Pivot program is actually what facilitates that process within the NFIP. So thinking about flood risk, if it rains, it can flood. If it snows, it can flood. And since 1996, 99% of the counties across America have experienced a flood event. And thinking about a flood event, it can be absolutely devastating. An inch of water can be $25,000 worth of damage.
So the Pivot acquisition program, I see here it is a level 2 acquisition program. I think everyone is now always going to associate that with the E.T. movie. That means it's the value of the program over its lifetime is over $100 million, and it's a service. Do you happen to know what is the total value of the Pivot acquisition program?
Over its life cycle, it's just under $800 million.
800 million. Wow. So it doesn't quite meet that threshold to be the big program, but I'd say it's still sizable at $800 million. So with that, we're going to move on to the next slide. Let me see here. Next slide. Okay. So we know now what's in Pivot. It's an IT system. It's a system of record, claims and policies. But, it occurred to me, I live in a flood zone myself, and I do have flood insurance. Does that mean that Pivot is this IT system that's going to come and fix my house when I have a flood?
No, it will not, but it will facilitate the process of you getting your claim paid. So the Pivot system facilitates that process within the National Flood Insurance Program. So it enables near real-time reporting of data and streamlines the process amongst the different players within the NFIP. If we think back to our legacy system, which was built back in the 80s, it was essentially a once a month sort of a process where reporting was made available so that if you were submitting for a policy or a claim, etc., it took that much time to get any sort of feedback. Whereas now the different players can look into the system to get near real-time updates and streamline that process and protect homeowners and provide that funding much quicker than before.
2019 wasn't all that long ago. I mean, I know it was the last decade, but it was only a few years ago. Does that mean, say the year 2015, if my house had flooded and I had flood insurance, I mean, would I have been able to submit my claim over my phone? Because even at that time, I could have done that with my car insurance.
No, sadly, it was not possible at that time. We're the government. We do our best, but we're not we're not that fast. And that was part of what got the process rolling was this need. And in fact, a GAO report called us out for not having a quick enough response time, being responsive to Americans who were suffering from flood damage. So that was part of the impetus for modernizing the system and making Pivot a reality.
You say it's affecting so many people in a GAO report. We know GAO falls within the legislative branch, so you're talking your congressmen, your senators. I see here 5 million. Is that just 5 million people that the pivot system and the processing of claims, does it just affect 5 million people? Am I reading that correctly?
No, so we have currently about 5 million policies in force, and those policies are protecting homeowners and to a lesser extent business owners. And it's not just individuals, it's families. It's conceivably broader than that. If you think about your home being your biggest investment and maybe passing that on to generations after you, or how much money you have sunk into that investment, 30% of your paycheck, for instance. So it's a significant amount of people, and it impacts many Americans.
So in 2015, if my house flooded, I'd have to somehow go find a printer, print out the form, try to find a post office that's not flooded, and then mail my form to FEMA. And it would have taken months before I get cash. And meanwhile, my house, it's got mold, it's got water. Now that the pivot system is in place, because people are going to learn now that the system exists, it's existed since 2019. How long does that claims process take now?
Well, so before, it would take at least a month before, conceivably up to a month before some of the activities could happen, at least on the government side. Obviously, people can interact with their insurance companies quicker than that, but as far as the real processing, it would take at least a month. Now, those claims, those policies, those interactions can happen in near real time, so that FEMA can start responding far quicker in the process. So that will speed up the process of not just establishing the fact that you have a policy, but if you have a claim, if you have an appeal, if there are issues in that process, it gets discovered and acted upon in conceivably days versus weeks or beyond a month.
Yeah, that's a real relief. Is that, time is money, especially if your home is flooded and has water damage. So that's a relief that things are working so quickly now, supporting not just 5 million policyholders, but if you include their families, some 20 million plus people. That's incredible. Now, I want to take us to our next slide. Let's talk about the role that contracts have played in meeting the need of this acquisition program pivot. So let's start with the first two phases. Now, John, I want you to know our audience today, they've learned all about the acquisition program process. And they've been to lunch. They know how to apply the process to lunch. So they have an idea of maybe what happened in that need, analyze, select phase. But can you talk a little bit about maybe what really did happen for pivot in the analyze, select phase, and the timing of those gates, that ADE1 and that ADE2A when you got the money?
Sure. So as I mentioned previously, that GAO report was quite an impetus to act. And so there was some political pressure building and a lot of buy-in from leadership within FEMA. So that really put the pedal to the metal for the team to start moving through that process far quicker perhaps than otherwise. So we gathered the available information, started working with the contracting officer, stood up that IPT, and started doing our due diligence to create the documents to get the approvals necessary. The initial contract action was actually an interagency agreement with the Department of Agriculture.
Oh.
Yeah, so the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, that's interesting. It wasn't a contract. Okay, so it's an interagency agreement, and which. Oh, okay, and that was in like the need or the analyze select phase. It was in one of those phases, the actual
phase,
support.
yes. During the analyze.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So they actually helped us with a lot of the documentation. The Department of Agriculture has an agency called the Digital Infrastructure Support Center, the DISC. So they are an IT services broker for the federal government, and we utilize their services, and they stood up several contracts, several vendors to start helping us with that developmental process and get us a little quicker through some of those acquisition activities, because they were doing some of those activities on our behalf. So obviously we were providing subject matter expertise, requirements, so on and so forth. That was instrumental in getting the program quickly up and running. to getting us
Yeah.
past those gates.
So that analyze select phase, going back to our sandwich analogy, if you're out there, maybe this happens to you, you already know you're hungry, you've identified your need. Analyze select phase, you're trying to figure out, do I want pizza or a sandwich? Well, maybe you can't quite figure that out and you need help. Maybe you ask a friend, maybe you ask your partner, maybe you ask your parents, I don't know, what should I get? Should I get a pizza or should I get a sandwich? I need help deciding. That's almost like what happened here, and it sounded like you entered into these interagency agreements to be able to sort out and finish that analyze select phase. Now I want to move on. So we get to ADE2A. That means, okay, the money's been freed up for you to now go award your contract in that obtain phase. Can you tell us a little bit about what that contract was and what that looked like?
So still working within that interagency agreement, those various contract organizations were helping us out in what's called an agile development model. So we were a pilot program, one of 5 started through DHS, and in that process, we realized we needed a little extra support for some of the aspects of the program. So we actually worked with the PIL in 2018, FY 2018, to stand up an additional team to help with some of the reporting capability, migrating some of that information, and establishing a portal for the end users. So that was a very successful effort that we used PIL techniques.
Yeah, if the year is 2018 and you're out there upgrading an IT system from 1983, I'm no IT specialist, but gosh, I would want to make sure that a company of today would know how to upgrade a system that's that old. So we were really happy to be able to engage with that team. And remember, that is PIL webinar number 39. For those of you who are new to DHS and are curious to hear the pivot team story, you can go and watch that recording on our DHS Connect page. So that's one contract that supported the acquisition program process here. Let's see, looking at our timeline. I'm noticing the gates ADE1 to ADE2A, it's only about a year. Now, John Gatewood told us, it could take many years. Here's taken 1 year to go from identifying a need to, boom, I have money. Is that typical, or did you receive special treatment? How did you get your money so fast, and is this considered fast?
Well, so a couple of things. So the first thing is the National Flood Insurance Program gets money from the policy premiums. So that definitely helps with the money side of the house. Obviously we still have to wait for particular congressional approvals, but that in itself enables some of that process. Another aspect was that scathing GAO report that really lit a fire under us, I suspect, to that ball impacts political will. And of course, working with the IPT, close collaboration with the contracting officer, and reaching out to others such as the PIL to help us through the process. That all those things culminated in expediency in many ways.
All right, very good. So things are quick. It sounds like a GAO report is quite the motivator. At least it was for this particular acquisition program process. And we have a contract award in FY18 to support the obtain phase. You have a system. It's launched in 2019. Well, now we get to FY20, that ADE3. You're entering the final phase. It's the final countdown. I don't know how many of you know
The final frontier.
There you go. The final frontier, the last frontier. There we are. As we enter the last frontier, it was time yet again for another contract. Can you tell us a little bit about what this contract was that was needed in this final produce, deploy, support, dispose phase?
Yes. So this is the operation and maintenance contract. So as you all well know, the tail is the longest in these efforts, particularly for an IT system. And as an agile program, of course.
I actually don't know that, John. So can you give us a background on why?
Let me tell you.
Can you explain why sometimes this is longer?
So an IT program, once you establish it, it's not fire and forget. You have to do regular maintenance. We're talking about updates to the system, security patches, updating your cyber resilience. oh, and by the way, if you're doing a great job, then, oh, didn't the system just do this or that or the other? So there are actually more requirements that start popping up as time moves on. And so this O&M effort is very important for keeping the lights on and also making sure that that system is resilient, that it's available, that it's has all the capabilities necessary. So what was done was a combination of all of those, pulling all those contracts into one prime, and that one prime would be basically the belly button to continue the program and making sure that everything was functioning properly.
Wow, and that this giant contract, and I'm noticing it's barely 2 years after the last contract to go and build the IT system. So it sounds like everyone is just busy all the time. Contracting officers, program managers, multiple PR packages. I see Rex here in the chat says that operations and maintenance at final phase can be 75% of your overall cost for an IT program lifecycle. That's incredible. Wow. So let's move on now. We want to talk a little bit about the timing of these contracts. I'm moving on to slide 32. That FY18 contract sounds like it was on time, very timely. You needed in the obtain phase, you got in the obtain phase. You know, even though there was a pressure from GAO, things were moving along when they needed to happen. And you said there was a lot of collaboration, early collaboration and planning with the contracting officer. But in FY20, right around this ADE3, a contract was awarded in FY20, so technically on time for that big operations and maintenance, but there was some turbulence. Now, those of you in the chat, remember it's FY 2020. What world event can you recall that may have happened in FY 2020? That's right. There you go.
They've got a better memory than me.
I've already forgotten the last 3 years. Okay. Yeah, that's right. The COVID-19 pandemic. And that did play a role in some of the turbulence that this team experienced. So we're going to go to the next page. We're going to slide 33. We're going to talk about what happened with these two contracts, like actual boots on the ground. What did it look like? So let's look at the on-time contracts. In FY 2018, the obtain phase, what did that whole process look like in getting that awarded, John?
So this was like a very good example of interacting with PIL. We had this engagement with the PIL team for a smaller effort. It was a small business, $17.7 million contract, and the IPT engaged with the contracting officer, engaged with the PIL coach, and walked hand in hand collaboratively through this process. Established a couple of phases, first with the video and the second with orals, and then advisory down select. And if you listen to that webinar number 39, I wasn't around on the program during this time frame, so I went back and reviewed it, and it was interesting to hear the branch chief at the time talking about how he was sort of skeptical about certain things and he didn't know about if they would work, but having gone through that process, that he would definitely do those things again. So it was sort of reaffirming the value of some of these techniques, and of course, close collaboration with the team. So that went through a 4-month halt and got awarded to that small business.
And ultimately, it met the mission. It sounded like it was timely and it met the mission. Good to hear. Now, I'm going to answer, there was a poll question. We're going to go over the answers real quick. Scott, can you review our answers to our poll question?
I would love to. We asked, have you supported an acquisition program before? And it looks like, wow, it looks like 77%, 170 people have said yes. And it's just 20% that say no, and only 2% don't know. So that is fantastic. Look for another poll soon. We're going to launch it here in a moment.
Yeah, here in seconds, new poll. Now, moving on to this FY 2020 contract for the operations and maintenance. Now, we've heard from John Gatewood. We've heard from you, Mr. Mosley. We've even heard from someone in the chat. When you're in that final phase, things tend to get really expensive. And I'm seeing here, it's a $134 million contract. That's just for sustainment. Whereas the original buy is back here, $17 million plus whatever you spend on your interagency agreement. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened with that 2020 contract?
Well, as before, we already had experience with the PIL and moving along with the program we needed to do an O&M contract to keep the system healthy and sustained. And so went back with IPT, collaborating with the contracting officer, and of course with the PIL. I will say though that from my understanding, the contracting officer was newer to FEMA and not as familiar with PIL techniques. And so even though they were brought along with the rest of the team and participating with the PIL, there was some reticence to just stick with the PIL techniques. And so the team was requested to produce some additional kind of traditional acquisition documentation in the case of protest, right? So there was some risk averseness to that. So that was part of it. The pandemic, of course, was an overall issue. I mean, I can recall from those days just struggling to think clearly on the job as world events were unfolding. So I'm very proud the team got through this process. But the other sort of typical sort of delays, like despite the best efforts of both sides, right? I mean, everyone is doing their best, but maybe some unmet expectations, miscommunication, those sort of things kind of played roles, and of course, bureaucracy kind of gets in the way. You think it's going to be this week, but it's the next, so on and so forth. But by and large, despite all of those issues, they got through. They got a 4.5-month halt and ended up getting Program of the Year despite all of that. No help for me. I came on the program after this thing got awarded, but lots of work and difficulty, but still got through that process.
Yeah, this is, for those of you who are new to DHS, this is one of the benefits of working with the PIL, of stepping into the Procurement Innovation Lab to try something new. This particular procurement team, while the program office had used innovations before, the contracting officer had not, and he reached out to the PIL. He was completely open to using new techniques. But, in that planning, it was unlearning old things, learning new things. The pandemic happened. And you know what? While there were challenges, because he was in the PIL, he had the top cover from the chief procurement officer. And in the end, I feel like this 4.5-month poll time, the procurement action lead time, that solicitation release to award was 4.5 months. Now, that's 4.5 months for $134 million. 2 years earlier, it was 4 months for $17 million. So I hope this stands as a testament of, how the team in that planning, they really did come together. It just took them a little bit longer to understand each other's language, so to speak. And because they had that top cover in the PIL, they were covered. They were okay. That team really learned forward. I remember in the end, I ended up having a really good experience once that solicitation was released. But there was a question in the chat about what type of contract that was in 2020. Being in FAR 16505, I know that's contracting officer speak, but it was a task order, and it was off of the Alliant 2 GWAC. So that was based on the market research at the time. That's why they ended up going with that particular task order, that particular GWAC. All right. Do we have any other questions in the chat from our
I don't see any
audience?
other questions in the chat.
Okay.
We do have a poll to go over.
You know what? We do. Scott, would you please go over our new poll?
Sure. We asked people, do you feel you have a better understanding of the various ways the word acquisition is used across DHS? And I'm really happy about this one. 83% say yes. Yes, they feel better. It looks like just 16% say maybe. 2% say I'm not sure yet, and nobody said no. So that is wonderful to see. I think our webinar is getting through us.
Well, I appreciate everyone, being and admitting and revealing and being vulnerable and saying, I walked in here not knowing everything. So I bet they knew some of it. So I really appreciate that.
I did have a question as we were going through this.
Yeah.
And I see we've got a little bit of time. We've had a lot of discussion about how that phase 4 is the most expensive and the longest phase. But a lot of that was around IT services. And so is that the same for tangibles in those capital assets?
John or John, would either of you know that?
Yeah, I'd say, TSA with all the, with all the hardware and all the scanning equipment. So yeah, you have very large maintenance contracts you have. These are electronic systems. They break down at airports, and you have to have teams to go out there to fix it. So yeah, you still get some hefty costs at that end too.
And I know Coast Guard, they've got some really big systems with those C-130s and stuff like that. Those must be expensive to maintain as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
And, I hadn't even thought about with TSA, I guess if a machine breaks, it's got to be fixed quickly.
Absolutely.
So, and time is money, as we've learned, not just with your house being flooded, but I guess if you have to fix a security screening machine quickly, that contractor is going to want some serious cash.
Yep.
All right, very good. We're going to move on to the next slide. So, John, can you tell us, as a program, and I'm talking John Mosley, we're back to FEMA now. Sorry, everyone, with my homonyms. John, what expertise is it that program managers most appreciate from their contracting offices?
It's really the business understanding, right? Like, thinking of the pivot team, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, but together we build each other up. We fill in those gaps, we build, better products together. We're just asking our contracting officers to be a business partner in this process. And, there's a lot of learning. So, being open to, new things, being teachable, right? So the folks in this class are teachable, right? They're, you asked people what they didn't know. Like, you have to be humble to recognize that you have a deficiency. And so when you start building on that, that's where the beauty happens. So bringing them along for the ride, having early engagement, that open door policy, a collaborative sort of working relationship. And right now we're going through a recompete on this O&M effort. And, we've started engaging very early on with our contracting officer, our portfolio manager, brought the IPT around. So we're having these regular intervals, and we're continually communicating with each other. So that's what's important, because we don't know all the pitfalls or the roadblocks, but that contracting officer, that's the person who might be able to guide us early on so that we don't start veering off on a course. I think about agile methodology, right? Fail fast. Like, if we're going off track, tell us early so we can adjust and be more effective with our efforts.
So you say there's a recompete, and you've already invited your contract officer to the table. How far out is this recompete that we're talking about?
Well, today we're almost at the 18-month mark, but 6 months ago, even a year ago, we were starting our planning process. I'm a project manager, a program manager, so I think I need a project plan, I need a roadmap. So I started working with the team to get our plan into place and have that early collaboration, just to know what to expect, because it's a massive contracting effort, a lot of money. And we want to make sure that we do things right. And so that engagement with the CO early was important in the process.
Well, I imagine, if we have contracting officers in the room, as CO, I was pretty busy. I don't know about you, Scott. I was a busy contracting officer, and if I got those invites 18 months out from a procurement, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't have a PR package. I got other things to do. I don't have time. John, I want to ask you something that I've always wanted to ask a program manager. If you're inviting me that early as a contracting officer, are you expecting the contracting officer to say, write your market research report for you?
No way. And honestly, the earlier on, it was not. We weren't beating down the contracting officer's door. We were communicating and allowing the opportunity. And if they were able to attend, they were able to attend. If not, they got the information. The contracting officer we have now, we have a newer one just recently, and she's been fantastic. She's come to an IPT meeting or two. She's looking for briefing slides. We're trying to be very diligent in our efforts, and the fact that she's curious and she's engaged. But we're the subject matter experts on our requirement, right? We need to know what we want, right? We need to be able to defend that procurement strategy and make it clear as day in our market research report, why we're going the way we're going. So it's just about setting those expectations and sharing that information, right?
Yeah, I'd like to ask our audience, what kind of, before the PR package, what kind of support have you seen from the contracting office, or what type of support as a contracting officer have you provided before the receipt of that PR package? I'd love to know what that looks like. And I appreciate, John, that you admit you don't want the CO to write everything, you're just looking for some guidance. And as a reminder, the periodic table of acquisition innovations, just for the market research example, there are several innovative procurement techniques related to market research that a contracting officer could advise upon and simply pass on to the program manager. And some of the other items here, things like advice on CLIN structure, thinking ahead to contract administration and invoice structure, writing the acquisition plan. We're going to get to that question in a second. Those are things where we are actually going to have some webinar topics on these things throughout the year. So even if you're a newer contracting officer or new to DHS and are wondering, well, what resources are available, for a contracting officer to pass on, before that PR package, we're going to cover some of those in our topics this year. If there's a specific topic you'd like to see, let us know in the chat or send us an email at pil@hq.dhs.gov. So in looking in the chat here, I'm looking at some of this feedback, Scott. Carl, he mentions how a portfolio manager helps. I think that's unique to FEMA. A portfolio manager, I think, is kind of like that, like a liaison between
kind of like the in-between.
Yeah, the between. They speak both languages. They speak contracting language and program language, and they sort of help the two. They have a facilitator to help bring everyone together.
A translator, if you will.
Yeah, that sounds quite nice. Let's see, another example. Oh, Sean Murphy says, my CEO has been holding brown bag sessions with CORs where we answer any questions and go over what we look for in documents like market research and J&As. Oh, I like that. You see any other, Scott?
No, I think these are all great. I just know that when I was a CEO, I got pushback once for a team who wanted to involve me early. And my branch chief was really, why are you involved in this if it's not 2 years out? You don't have any role yet. And I pushed and I was part of that. And it was really eye-opening because when I went to meetings later on to support the AP and the solicitation, I had all of this background knowledge in the program. And I was not as knowledgeable as the PM, great guy, but I had so much information that I could use to better make that solicitation, to speed things along, and to provide things, like they say, the right templates to get that background. It was just wonderful to be a part of that process.
I like that. That sounds kind of like what Jill here has said. In a past life, well, hopefully it's the same life, Jill. You were a contracting officer and you would encourage early involvement with the program managers. And I saw one here where some of them are receiving maybe some facilitation assistance with their PWS, with their PRs. We do have some PILcast on this. There was recently, just a few weeks ago, another FEMA contracting officer is featured in a PILcast about jam sessions. And her program office didn't have a full PR package together. And she wasn't going to do it for them, but she facilitated 3 jam sessions in 1 week. And wouldn't you know, that PR package was done.
Yep.
So it's not like she had all the answers, but she was able to, in 1 week, 3 jam sessions. I think it was something like 4.5 hours done.
Did you say this was Sheila again from the PIN?
No, this was Armida Cato from
maybe
FEMA.
Armida should join us for the PIN.
Oh, that's an idea. Yeah. We'll have her join us.
That'd be a great story.
PINs. Yeah.
Angela also says that the more we as contracting professionals understand the requirement, the better we can help with the development of the contract package. Love it.
Oh, thank you for that, Angela. That's really great perspective from a contracting officer. All right, we do have one more poll question. I did ask who writes the acquisition plan, since we mentioned that on this slide. And I see a majority of you think it is both the PO and the CS. Well, I'm not going to go over the answers just yet. So, because we have some other interactive exercises to review. So let's move on to our exercises. All right, everyone, warm up your fingers. And we do have a question in the chat, Jason, upcoming PIL boot camps. They are already in CSOD for the spring. So please go ahead into CSOD to find the upcoming PIL boot camp, the next level, and PIL coaching clinic. And remember, if you want to sign up for the PIN, send us an email at pil@hq.dhs.gov. All right, people are already answering this question. The question is, fill in the blank. All right, I'm going to take this one, Scott.
All right.
All right, fill in the blank. Component blank executive. I think we have consensus in the chat. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Component acquisition executive. All right, let's see. Is that correct?
I think we should have asked what the C stands for, because for a long time I thought it was the Chief Acquisition Executive, and that is wrong. I was wrong with that. It's the Component Acquisition Executive. I think that would have been a harder question.
I love that it's just a new acronym for us to use at DHS.
There you go.
It is. I'll take it. All right, you take the next question, Scott.
All right, let's go on to the next one here. In which acquisition program process might a contract need to be awarded? We're going to give you a reminder of the phases here. We've got phase 1, that need phase. We've got phase 2, the analyze phase. Phase 3, the obtain phase, or phase 4, produce, deploy, support, and dispose. And we do have a hint up here that says select all that apply.
Ooh,
A
important
lot of people
hint.
out there that are ahead of me here and said 3. I got some 3 4s. I got some 2 to 5s. I don't know where the 5 is coming in,
I
but
think I see the first all. I think Steve.
Oh, yeah.
All.
There we go.
All
The weather is
right.
changing now.
But we still have consensus on 3. I think that is when we.
I've got more 2, 3, 4s now. There's a lot. I think we're split here. I don't think our on-the-spot consensus has consensus yet. Oh, wait, that's a different webinar.
Different webinar.
Well, Sandra, what's the answer here?
Sort of a trick question.
All of them. All
A
right.
contract may be needed in all of the phases. And I see consensus in the chat now. So I think
Now we
everyone,
do, yeah.
everyone remembered that's right. We might need a contract earlier. It's the obtain phase where it's the contract for the thing that the program is for. Like that's it. That is the pivot system. That is 3. Yes, we might need one in all of them. Do we want to do another one?
Oh, yeah, I think so. We got time.
Okay, let's do that. All right. Here it is. Who writes the acquisition plan? Is it the program manager? Is it the contracting officer? Is it both the PM and the CO together, or is it neither? Maybe it's none of the above.
I think it's that little alien. He's going to write it for them. He's got advanced technology enough.
I'm seeing, you know what? I think I'm seeing consensus around 3. Let's reveal the answer. Yeah, good job. Now this guidance actually comes from our HSAM. Oh, another DHS acronym. That is the Homeland Security Acquisition Manual. Now, the acquisition plan is something that has to be signed off by the contracting officer and the program manager side. So it's something that should be developed together. And I do believe that in the acquisition plan, there is a specific question asking, is this contract part of an acquisition program? And so for those of you who maybe weren't entirely certain, now that you learned a new language today, now you have a better understanding of specifically what that means. So with that, I think we'll take us to our closing. All right. So if everyone could please take our final polls, we'd like to know how we did today, and we would love your feedback. So while you're doing that, quick reminder about the Procurement Innovation Neighborhood. We had our soft launch this month. This will be a monthly 1-hour engagement on the second Wednesdays of every month from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Informal how-to conversations from actual COs, CORs, program managers, end users, attorney advisors on how to use specific innovative procurement techniques. It's a 2-way conversation. It's on Microsoft Teams. You can come off mute and ask your questions. We'll also go over new policies, and we'll go over recent protests and how to read them and how to interpret protests to help us manage risk in the procurement process. So please be sure to send us an email at pil@hq.dhs.gov to join us. Want some more bite-sized training? We also have PILcasts. So PILcasts are 10-minute or less video trainings on various procurement innovation topics. And we almost always have a guest, usually it's a contracting officer or another end user, talking about a specific innovation they use in their experience with it. So if you're looking for those bite-sized trainings, please check out the PIL's YouTube channel and be sure to subscribe. Need other samples? Need information? Need to reach out to the PIL? We are on DHS Connect. So you can see our previous yearbooks. Our yearbooks have lots of short stories about innovations other teams have used in the past. If you need support, that's on this page. If you're new to DHS and you want to look at our past PIL webinars, that is also on our DHS Connect channel. We highly encourage you to take a look at those. Have you heard of the PIL Idea Competition? It's our crowdsourcing platform that allows the DHS frontline workforce to solve difficult challenges and improve procurement processes. Each crowdsourcing effort is sponsored by an executive at your component. We do have a few that are in prototyping right now. So if you think your component would be interested in solving a process, please reach out to us and we can talk about bringing PIL Idea Competition to your component. Do you have your DigiBadge? So we have over 2,000 DigiBadges issued. We're about to hit the 3,000 mark. If you have attended 5 PIL webinars and have applied one innovative procurement technique on your own, you qualify for a level 1 DigiBadge, but you need to email us. Send us an email now for your PIL level 1 DigiBadge. Let us know what 5 webinars you watched, even if it's a recording, what innovation you've used, and we'll send you a DigiBadge. There are 3 levels. We're about to release our PIL yearbook, and you'll see soon how we have lots of new faces in our level 2 and in our level 3 DigiBadge levels. Need support? Submit a PIL one-pager. On the PIL's DHS Connect, we have an icon that says PIL one-pager. If you would like for your team to be coached by the PIL, if you want to step into the lab to try something that is new to your team, we are here to help. Simply submit a PIL one-pager and a coach will be in touch.
Wait, you didn't mention ad hoc support.
Oh, that's right, everyone. Something new we're offering this year. If you have already previously stepped into the PIL to try something new, and you've been innovating for a while, but you would like some very focused assistance with something you're doing, maybe you just want some temporary assistance with a jam session, maybe some quick advice on how to run an on-the-spot consensus, or a question about an oral presentation, we now offer ad hoc support to your team. So if you just want temporary support from the PIL and you've been innovating for a while, please give us a call. You can submit a one-pager or you can email us directly or reach out directly to any PIL coach. We are here to assist and we are happy to help you take your procurements to the next level. Thank you for that, Scott. Have you attended a PIL boot camp? All of our trainings for the spring for a PIL boot camp, the next level, and coaching clinic are already in CSOT. But if you don't want to wait until the spring to learn about what's in the PIL boot camp, you can watch the PIL primer and you can receive 1 COP. So click on the link to watch the PIL primer today. And for those of you in the audience who have a FAC-C, that's a FAC contracting certification, and you're interested in learning more about program management or even being a core, it could be you only have to take 1 or 2 more classes to get those certifications. So be sure to reach out to your acquisition career manager to see what you may have to do just to get a few more certifications and to get a better understanding of the program management process. Need samples? The Periodic Table of Acquisition Innovation has them. This site lives at fai.gov and it's full of little short descriptions of what each innovative procurement technique does. And if you need solicitation samples, they are here. Many of the samples you will recognize come from DHS teams who have stepped into the PIL to try something new. So thank you to all those teams who have contributed.
Just a public service announcement. The Periodic Table of Acquisition Innovations is going to be changing locations soon. So that old address that you have bookmarked will need to be updated.
Thank you for that, Scott. And for those of you, let's remember what FAR Part 1 tells us. Contracting officers should take the lead in encouraging business process innovations and ensuring that business decisions are sound. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thanks especially to John and John. Bye now.